Magic the Gathering, the best card game run by the worst company. You know that's not a compliment, right? So as you guys have already heard, I'm sure by now, Dominaria has been leaked. Um, I don't know. This keeps happening. I don't know why, but it can't be good for business. Anyhow, this time they actually let us see the release note, so I thought we'd look over it and see what there is. Gives us the information about the set. Tells us our spotlight cards, broken bond, final parting, settle the score, and Bolus's clutches. So obviously Nicol Bolas is here in Dominaria again, up to his old tricks. They've given us, they've says the story spotlight cards in this set feature a planeswalker symbol in their text boxes. The icon has no effect on gameplay in Blackboard maybe, and unstable, probably a watermark. So the printed cards also include the mtgstory.com URL and a number indicating the sequence of the card or cards in the story. So the URL is kind of interesting. I kind of wonder how that's going to be in 30 years when the URLs may be changed and somebody's looking at it. New mechanics or saga cards. It says the Dominaria set has introduced a new kind of enchantment, sagas. Each saga tells the story of a key event from the past as it unfolds during each of your turns. So we have a sample card here, History of Benalia. 2 white and a worn generic enchantment saga. As this saga enters and after your draw step, add a lore counter. Sacrifice it after 3. So 1 and 2 lore counters create a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance. When you put your third one on, knights you control get +2/+1 until end of turn. As a saga enters the battlefield, its controller puts a lore counter on it. As your pre-combat main phase begins, immediately after your draw step, you put another lore counter on it. On each saga that you control, putting a lore counter on a saga is in either of these ways does not use the stack. So it's interesting that they're using this at your pre-combat main phase and not during your upkeep. Kind of seems like they've been getting away from the upkeep for some reason lately. But the upkeep really seems like that's where this should go. Each symbol on the left of the saga's text box represents a chapter ability. A chapter ability is a triggered ability that triggers when a lore counter that is put on the saga causes the number of lore counters on the saga to become equal to or greater than the ability's chapter number. Chapter abilities are put onto the stack and may be responded to. So you put a counter on it, you do kind of like the level up abilities, I suppose. It's interesting that it says each symbol on the left of the saga's text box represents a chapter ability. So I'm kind of thinking this is going to end up being a new card frame here just for sagas. Kind of like the Planeswalker frames are just for Planeswalkers. So the chapter ability doesn't trigger if a lore counter is put on a saga that already had a number of lore counters greater than or equal to. So this is just rules text saying if you put 3 counters on it at one time, all 3 trigger. But if you already had 1 and you put an additional 2 on there, then 2 and 3 trigger, but 1's already been triggered, and so it would not happen again. Once the number of lore counters on a saga is greater than or equal to the greatest number among its chapter abilities, and it specifies in the Dominaria set, or this specific block, there's always 3. The saga's controller sacrifices it as soon as its ability has left the stack, most likely by resolving or being countered. It's a state-based action that doesn't use the stack. So we might see other sagas in the future that have more than 3 abilities, 3 chapters. So this kind of reminds me of, what was it, Sapadian Empires, volume 7 or whatever, that was a book or a book of stories revolving around the sapperling and fungus cards back from Fallen Empire. I wonder if that's going to be in the set or coming in the future, perhaps. A major theme is legendary permanents, so we're back to legends. Kind of a legends throwback, I guess. Legendary characters, new and old, have risen to prominence across the plane. In every Dominaria booster pack, you'll find at least one legendary creature. Beyond just creatures, the set also features a significant number of other legendary cards. So I guess they're sneaking specific cards in here as well. I wonder if this is going to be like the, what was it, contraptions in Unstable, where you had a contraption in the back or something. I guess we'll have legendary permanents in the back of our packs. I wonder if we can get like 2 mythics because of this, perhaps. So they give us a couple examples here. Joda, Archangel Eternal. It's a white, blue, red, and worn generic legendary creature, human wizard. It's a 4/3 flyer, and you can pay Wooburg white, blue, black, red, or green, rather than pay the mana cost for spells you cast. I guess that's great if you have a lot of expensive cards in your deck. Mox Amber is a legendary artifact. Tap. Add 1 mana of any color among legendary creatures and planeswalkers you control. So we get another Mox. That's kind of exciting. I'm going to go through and tell us, starting the Dominaria set, legendary cards and other planeswalkers use a modified card frame with additional flourishes on the title bar. This change is cosmetic and has no rules meaning, so I guess it's kind of like our planeswalker frames, we're going to now have a legendary frame. Yeah. I guess. If a player controls, we're talking about legendary rules. I think we all know legendary rules. New mechanic, legendary sorceries. Dominaria debuts legendary sorcery cards that capture extraordinary moments from our chapter's pasts, or from a character's pasts. Powerful spells can be unleashed only with the assistance of a legendary creature or planeswalker on your side of the battlefield. And our example is Urza's Ruinous Blast, a white and 4 generic legendary sorcery. Exile all non-land permanents that are not legendary. You can't cast legendary sorcery unless you control a legendary creature or a legendary planeswalker. Once you begin to cast the legendary sorcery, losing control of your legendary creature and planeswalkers won't affect the spell. Other than the casting restriction, the legendary super type or a sorcery carries no additional rules. So, you know, I said it earlier when we saw the legendary, this was kind of like a Legends throwback. Now with this, the legendary sorcery, this is maybe more appropriate as a Kamigawa throwback, because this is really seeming kind of like that arcane, splice into arcane kind of effect here. We have a new term, historic. If you look at this set's saga cards, legendary cards, and artifact cards, you'll see a broad swath of Dominaria's extensive and mysterious history. Some cards celebrate the playing's story past by rewarding you for playing these historic cards. Historic is a game term that refers to the card that has the legendary super type, the artifact card type, or the saga enchantment type. Our example is Chihora, Weatherlight Captain, red, blue, and 2 generic, legendary creature, human artificer, 3/3. Whenever you cast a historic spell, draw a card. Artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are historic. So I could see this being a little confusing. I don't see anything really that connects the artifact type, legendary super type, and saga subtype. There's not, I mean, I guess legendaries, you have a legendary story behind it. Saga is like you've got a book that tells a big story, and artifacts are just kind of around for a long time. I have a feeling in a few years when we pull one of these historic cards out, or a card that refers to a historic out, and we try playing it, we're not going to remember what it means to be historic. I can see this being an issue moving forward in the future. I guess we'll see. Returning keyword kicker. I've kind of liked kicker in the past. Kicker is a returning keyword that lets you pay more to give your spells a little oomph. For example is Baloth Gorger, 2 green and 2 generic. It's a creature beast. It's a 4/4 with kicker 4. If Baloth Gorger was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters. Alright. That's not bad. Rules for kicker haven't changed since its previous appearance. You can't pay kicker more than once unless it's multi-kicker, but we're not doing multi-kicker, so. Rules change. Damage can't be redirected to planeswalkers. We've heard about this in the past, kind of a rumored sort of thing. I guess it's okay. I think in the short term it's going to be rather confusing. In the long term it's probably a good thing. It says previously you could redirect non-combat damage that a source you control would deal to an opponent, having that source instead deal the damage to one of their planeswalkers. With the release of Dominaria, this rule is being removed from the game. A large number of cards that dealt a certain amount of damage to target player are receiving errata using the following guidelines. Abilities that read target creature or player have been changed to any target. Abilities that read target player have been changed to target player or planeswalker. However, if the amount of damage is calculated by using information about that player or objects they control, the ability remains unchanged and can now damage only the player. Abilities that read target opponent have been changed to target opponent or planeswalker, with the same exceptions listed above. These spells and abilities can target a planeswalker you control. So you can either target your opponent or you can target any planeswalker on the field, yours or someone else's. So it changes those cards a wee bit. Abilities that deal damage but don't call for a target haven't received errata, with one exception of Vile Smasher the Fierce. In addition to these changes, a small number of cards that modify damage are affected, notably effects that prevent damage that would be dealt to a target have received errata under the following guidelines, under the above guidelines. So a little bit of change there. I guess it makes it slightly easier to target some planeswalkers now. He gives us a couple examples of how they've changed the wording. Cards printed in Dominaria set that deal damage to creatures and or players but do but not to planeswalkers, such as the Planeswalker deck card Chandra Bold Pyromancer and the promotional card Fire Song and Sunspeaker require targets as written, even though similar cards have received errata. This is what I'm talking about. In the short term, I think this is going to be a pain because you've got some cards that follow one rule, other cards that don't. I think in the longer term, as we get more and more cards that follow these rules, it'll be less of an issue. New terms and various non-functional changes. So these are some, I guess, sort of errata type things that they're doing. Starting with the Dominaria set, several minor changes have been made to Magic's general terminology. These changes are stylistic and convey no change in functionality. The phrase mana pool has been removed from the card text. The concept continues to exist in the game's rule. If a player is instructed to add an amount of mana, the player adds that mana to the mana pool. Yeah. So we save a few words on some cards. Maybe we can use that space to add additional abilities in the future. I don't think we're really losing anything. We're generally still going to read it. You add grain to your mana pool. Magic has adopted they as the preferred third-person singular pronoun for a player, replacing he or she. Yeah. Okay. Abilities that modify how a spell behaves on a stack, such as additional costs, refer to themselves as this spell rather than using their name. Now, this is a change I can really get behind. I've wanted this for a long time. I thought that this makes it much more clear, and in a few cases it also saves a few characters on the card. When you get into things like copying spells or copying creatures and the card text refers to the card name, sometimes that can get a bit confusing when it uses the words this spell or this card. It makes it much easier to understand how those are supposed to work. Let's see. So here's our example. Wizard's Retort. 2 blue and the color a generic. Instant. This spell costs 1 less to cast if you control a wizard. Counter target spell. And last but not least, a bar now appears between the rules text and the flavors text on cards with both to make each more distinct. So we're going back to portal type styling, which not bad. Check lands, we're getting enemy color check lands back, which is kind of cool. And then we get into card specific notes. So I'm not going to go over all of these, but I did want to make a comment that this was really kind of interesting. It gave me let me reminisce a little bit. So back in the day, before there was much information on the internet, one of the things going to pre-release the day before, sometimes even the morning before, you could occasionally find a list of cards, if you knew right where to look, that would include the name, casting cost, type. If you got lucky, it would include information such as this is what the card did. And so as we were standing in line to register for our pre-release, we'd be reading through this information, looking at it, and seeing this in this sort of format was very reminiscent of those days. I liked it, but I mean, we've got weeks to chew over this now, whereas in the past it was, like I said, the night before, or sometimes even the morning of, we would be printing it out as we were walking out the door. So I can't believe this has happened again. This continues to happen. Um, I think Wizards needs to do something about this. I mean, releasing your IP as quickly as this, and set after set after set, um, that's a problem. So anyhow, I'll let you guys look over this. You can find this information on Wizards' website. I guess they're just kind of owning it now, and maybe this is the way things are going to work in the future. Something leaks, and they just put out the release notes, whatever. So anyhow, you'll find more on Wizards' website. We'll catch you guys later.